Hello, I'm Chuck Smith.
And I'm Carol Matriciana. Welcome to this edition of the Pagan Invasion. Dave, can you talk about how the entertainment industry is promoting pagan ideas?
One of the ways that the consciousness of the masses can most powerfully be influenced is through the mass media, which is increasingly being used for promoting Indian consciousness.
The film Gandhi was probably the most effective piece of Indian propaganda to invade the West. It was a political advertisement controlled and heavily financed by the Indian government and promoted by the peace movement. It propagates a false message of Hindu religious tolerance and non-violence. Historical accuracy was discarded. Gandhi was no different from most gurus today in that he was a sexual pervert and was certainly not the non-violent, peace-loving man as demonstrated in his racial killings of blacks in the Kafir Wars in South Africa. The most important message of the film was that Gandhi was one of the first gurus to link Christianity and Hinduism to form one package, a new religion. I consider him to be one of the fathers of the New Age movement.
So many of the most popular films today, like Close Encounters, Poltergeist, E.T., Return of the Jedi, Star Wars, are all based upon Hinduism. For example, the Force has a dark and a light side. That's black magic and white magic. The doorway into the occult is an altered state of consciousness. This is the way that Obi-Wan initiates Luke into the Force. He has him working a laser sword. He says, Luke, your problem is you're trying to think. He puts a visor over his face so he can't see. And he says, Luke, you got to tune it out and let the Force take over. That's an altered state of consciousness. In The Empire Strikes Back, Yoda is a yogi. He's got Luke standing on his head going through various contortions to develop the mind power to raise his spaceship out of the swamp. And when Luke can't do it, Yoda does. And Luke looks on and says, I don't believe it. And Yoda says, that's your problem. In other words, it's all in the mind. If you would only believe it would happen.
A child can understand the dark and light side of the Force. And to understand the Force is to understand basic Hinduism. George Lucas, creator of the Star Wars series, is in real life a devout believer in the Force, which he says can enable anyone to read minds, see past and future events, levitate, and plug into a nether world of psychic energy.
We are raising an entire generation of children under the bombardment of cartoons and television shows and fantasy role-playing games and movies that are telling them that the occult and Eastern philosophy is a wonderful thing, not something to be afraid of, not something ugly and fearful, but something beautiful with the darling reptilian creatures with the great psychic powers that are drawing these children into an acceptance of things that are dangerous beyond anyone's comprehension.
The minds of children are being trained in the use of the supernatural and taught the principle of creating what seems like reality through Hindu psycho-spiritual techniques of mind power. Dungeons and Dragons, for example, requires participants to mentally murder, rape, torture, and otherwise commit mayhem with the aid of occultic powers. In at least one popular game, Hindu deities like the goddess Kali are invoked. Hindu religious techniques, including repeated chants, visualization, and casting spells, are used to overcome enemies.
For you students who are new to our fantasy games class today, we're going to be playing Dungeons and Dragons, and I'd like to talk about a few of the advantages of using Dungeons and Dragons in a classroom. You may be wondering why you get to play games in school time.
These games are used in gifted children's programs throughout the United States. A clear majority of state-supported schools and colleges incorporate them into their curriculum.
And we call this an integrated curriculum. You guys are kind of familiar with that. You may encounter some violent creatures on the way, but the object is to be able to dispose of this ring that is the symbol of evil in the kingdom of Middle Earth.
It's in children's cartoons, from the Smurfs to Masters of the Universe. You've got your little granddaughter running around saying, "Shira, Princess of Power." And I don't need Jesus, I've got Shira. 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 I don't need Jesus, I've got Shira.